Hello Arcticers, welcome back to the Arctic Beyond. I'm of course your host Jack. I'm here to round up all the best, most interesting news stories from the Arctic in a new segment I'm calling the Arctic Brief. This week, sea ice that just broke records in the really wrong direction, a Norwegian glacier that's almost completely vanished, new science is asking whether polar bears can survive what's coming. We'll also hear how China is quietly mapping the ocean floor, possibly for submarine warfare, how a Russian scientist has been jailed for studying public health, and how Greenland's own government has secretly tried to retrieve rubies from a vault in Asia. And there's a lot more to get through, so let's begin. We start, as we so often must, with the ice. This week, the National Snow and Ice Data Center confirmed that Arctic sea ice has reached its winter maximum in mid-March. The ice tied with 2017 for the lowest winter maximum on record, in a satellite record stretching back almost 40 years. And it's worth pausing on what exactly this means. This is the peak. This is the most ice we're going to get all year. And it's already historically small, which bodes pretty poorly for the rest of the year to come. Winter sea ice represents the Arctic's best opportunity to rebuild after whatever's come the year before, when even the depths of polar winter can no longer push ice to where it once reached, when the Arctic can't complete its own recovery. Scientists say we're crossing thresholds that can't be easily uncrossed. The consequences, of course, are extending far beyond the polar region. Arctic sea ice is meant to reflect sunlight back into space. Without it, darker ocean water is absorbing sunlight and heat, which is disrupting the jet stream and altering weather patterns across Europe, North America, and Asia. Staying with the theme of vanishing ice, this week Norwegian researchers published a stark assessment of Nordmannsjökull, a glacier sitting on the island of Sealand in Finnmark country, inside Sealand National Park, and it holds the distinction of being Norway's northernmost glacier in mainland Norway, not counting Svalbard. Findings from the scientists are pretty unambiguous. Over the last 120 years, what was once a sizable ice cap, which could compare with all the best glaciers around Europe, has been reduced to little more than a few scattered remnants, like a few lingering ice cubes in a slushy that you really forgot to drink during the movie. And in recent years, this ice retreat has accelerated dramatically. Of course, what gives this story particular weight is that Sealand is far within the Arctic Circle, where the polar climate is the strongest. If glaciers, even in the deep Arctic, aren't able to survive the warming temperatures, then glaciers such as in the Alps or in the Himalayas, which are key water sources for very populous regions of the world, how are they meant to survive and keep water pumping to the millions and billions of people that need it? This week has also brought a landmark scientific review on polar bears, and its central finding is both important and sobering. It draws on 40 years of genetic research into polar bear populations across all 20 subgroups of the species living in the Arctic today. The question at the heart of the study is the one that matters most. Can polar bears evolve quick enough to survive the warming and the changing of their habitat? The answer, as the lead researcher Ruth Rivkin explained, there is evidence of genetic change happening, which I've reported on previously on the channel. Polar bears are seeing genetic shifts in their DNA, which is helping them cope with climate change. But these evolutionary shifts are happening very slowly. And these changes that are happening, they're only happening in little aspects of the polar bear's behavior. Maybe a slight change in how they handle heat, a slight change in how they handle a new diet. But there are so many habitat changes and climate changes and lifestyle changes coming to polar bears quickly, rapidly, and acceleratingly quickly. This doesn't mean polar bears are without hope. They are immensely intelligent, long-lived animals with remarkable behavioral flexibility. They can change what they do. But whether that's enough and in which parts of the Arctic they stay remains a very open question. This week has brought good news from the world of Arctic wildlife science. NOAA Fisheries has this week publicised results from what's been described as the first ever comprehensive aerial survey of ice seals across their entire range in US Arctic waters. The survey, which took place across 68 days in spring 2025, covered the Bering, Chukchi and Beaufort Seas using AI-equipped multispectral camera systems mounted on NOAA Twin Otter aircraft. The team flew more than 24,000 miles across the sea ice, equivalent to circling the entire planet. They documented the distribution and abundance of 4 seal species: ringed, bearded, spotted and ribbon seals. Crucially, it was the first time all 4 species' entire geographic range in US Arctic waters had been surveyed in a single season. But why does this matter? Why put all this effort and expense into such a project? These seals are keystone species in Arctic ecosystems. They are essential food sources for bears, killer whales, and coastal communities across Alaska. But as sea ice shrinks and shifts, so does their habitat and their behaviour. So understanding exactly how this affects where they go in the food chain, both who eats them and what they eat, is going to be crucial to understanding how the Arctic changes in the coming decades. And while we're on the subject of seals, I can't resist sharing the story of Wesley. Just days before Christmas, workers at a seafood plant in Unalaska, city in the Aleutian Islands, found an unexpected visitor. A young Steller sea lion pup wandering through their facility, eventually settling down for a nap in a workroom. The team worked with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game and local volunteers to transport Wesley, as the pup was then named, more than 2,300 miles to the Marine Mammal Center in California for rehabilitation. The species that Wesley belongs to, the Steller sea lions, has declined about 80% since the 1970s and continues to fall in the central and western Aleutian Islands, precisely where Wesley was found. NOAA notes that in a population under this kind of pressure, each individual matters. Who knows? Wesley could grow up under the care of these humans, be released into the wild, and father, I think it's a male, and father the pups that go on to really kickstart a population boom in these Steller sea lions. As of this broadcast, Wesley is still receiving care in California. Safe travels, little one. I'll be thinking of you. On to Geopolitics, a major investigative report by Reuters this week revealed the full scale of something military analysts have been watching with growing alarm. China is conducting a vast coordinated program to map the seabed and monitor undersea conditions across the Pacific, Indian, and Arctic Oceans. And the primary application, experts say, is for submarine warfare. Reuters tracked the movements of 42 Chinese research vessels over more than 5 years using ship tracking data from New Zealand company Starboard Maritime Intelligence. At least 8 of those vessels have conducted active seabed mapping, with another 10 carrying mapping-capable equipment. The vessels travel in tight, closely spaced parallel lines, the signature pattern of systematic ocean floor surveying. The data shows that Chinese vessels have mapped strategically critical waters near Taiwan, Guam, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and they are also mapping the seabed west and north of Alaska, the essential sea route into the high Arctic. Well, why does this matter? Submarine warfare depends massively on knowledge of undersea environment. The water temperature, salinity, currents, and terrain all determine how the likes of sonar waves travel, how submarines can conceal themselves, and how they can detect their rivals. Ryan Martinson, a professor of Chinese maritime strategy at the US Naval War College, has described the scale of this project as frankly astonishing. He added that for decades the United States Navy could assume an unmatched advantage in its knowledge of the ocean battle space. But China's program, he said, directly threatened that advantage.
China's strategic aim is increasingly clear: to make U.S. intervention in regional conflict slower, costlier, and riskier, and to expand China's control of contested waters, particularly within and beyond the first island chain.
Beijing has openly declared its ambition to become a polar great power, calling itself a near-Arctic nation. And this mapping campaign is one piece of how that ambition is being built. We turn now to Russia for a story that has horrified the international scientific community this week. Alexei Dudarev, 64 years old, has spent decades as a respected researcher at a state-funded institution in St. Petersburg, studying the health of communities living in Russia's northernmost regions, people who have been exposed to the toxic legacies of Soviet-era industry and global pollutants carried into the Arctic by air and ocean currents. He was one of the longest-serving members of the Arctic Monitoring and Assessment Program, a body run under the Arctic Council involving scientists from all Arctic nations. Yet on the 14th of January, Dudarev was arrested on his way to work. The charge? Treason. Russian authorities claim that his published scientific papers, work that has been produced openly, has been peer-reviewed and available in international journals, constituted the passing of sensitive information about Russia's Arctic activities to foreign entities. Utterly ridiculous. His colleagues around the world are frankly baffled. The work is public. It has been collaborative. It was just data collection. It was just science. And this isn't anything new. Last year, Russian courts secured a record 468 convictions for espionage-related offences. The definition of treason has been stretched beyond belief, including now there are whole ethnic groups and indigenous groups which have been labelled as treasonous or enemies of the state simply for existing. Dudarev has been in pre-trial detention for over 2 months now. His case is being heard behind closed doors. There is no public information about how his case is being handled, and he faces up to life in prison. So the question that remains is a pretty simple one. If studying public health in the Russian Arctic is treason, what is safe to study in Russia at all? Unfortunately, what is considered safe to study in Russia is warfare. The Barents Observer has reported that the Murmansk Regional Ministry of Education has organised drone operation training courses for school teachers across the region. More than 20 teachers from 14 municipalities have participated in the training, which was led by instructors from the 61st Naval Infantry Brigade, a unit based just kilometres from the Norwegian and Finnish borders. Hundreds of that same brigade's members are currently deployed in occupied Ukrainian territory. Teachers are learning to operate, repair, and maintain unmanned aerial vehicles. And even worse, the training has been framed as educational preparation. Drone warfare is now being integrated into school teaching across Russia as part of a Kremlin national project called Unmanned Aerial Systems. On the Kola Peninsula alone, which borders NATO member Norway, there are 21 drone training centres collaborating with schools and youth organisations. Students are being offered one-year contracts with the Ministry of Defence, and critics note that these contracts actually have no fixed expiry date, effectively underhandedly committing young people who have their whole life ahead of them to do whatever they want to improve the world into military service. I feel utterly heartbroken. I cannot tell you how upsetting I find this story, that these children are just being indoctrinated into a yet another military system where they are being taught to kill indiscriminately, let's be frank, under the guise of it becoming like a video game. This is going to be their life, and chances are they are going to grow up to be not good people. And yet, it's crucial to remember that they weren't always this way. They were children. They were children at one point. And this is what Russia does to its children. Norway, just of course across that border, announced this week that it's going to be increasing its defence spending to about 3.5% of its GDP, which effectively is going to be the highest it's ever contributed, because Norway sees the immense danger from having Russia as a neighbour. There's plenty of money for the Canadian military too, much of which is being applied in Canada's Arctic. And yet, a Reuters investigation in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, laid out the real tensions at the heart of Canada's Arctic ambitions. Cambridge Bay is just a small community, about 2,000 people on the tip of the Arctic Ocean. It has 2 grocery stores, 1 sports arena. Seeing a physician involves at least a 2-hour flight south. Dentists, they come to visit twice a year. That's the best you're ever going to get. Water, quite often, has to be delivered in by truck. Women who are pregnant have to fly to a city several hours away weeks before their due date in case they go into labour. And yet, amidst all of this, Prime Minister Mark Carney has said there's going to be a lot of money coming to Cambridge Bay. Except it's all going to the military. There's going to be 2 massive new northern military hubs as part of a $35 billion programme. The programme includes other things like airport upgrades, new runways, and bolstered Arctic defences, which, you know, is good in a way. But some residents of Cambridge Bay, like Natasha Neglaglia, who sits on the board of Kitikmeot Inuit Association, the announcement provoked a pretty pointed response from her. Her community needs a waste for at least, how about women to give birth? How about that? Before they start building massive new military hubs, how about a place where women can, give birth? Doesn't sound too hard, does it? Others in the community are more positive about military investment, seeing it as a potential economic turning point. But Inuit leaders have pretty painful memories of previous militarization efforts. During the Cold War, for instance, the government forcibly relocated communities and slaughtered thousands of sled dogs, ostensibly on public health grounds, stripping the Inuit of their own abilities to hunt, to travel to live their indigenous lifestyles. We move next to Greenland, where a story has risen which sounds kinda like a new Indiana Jones film, but it's actually kinda real and was probably going to be better than the last Indiana Jones film. Greenland's government has announced this week that it has retrieved Greenlandic rubies that were stranded in Asia and secured them in a secret location. The details are deliberately pretty vague. Officials have not disclosed where on Earth, where in Greenland I think, the gems are now. To understand why this is happening, you do need a little background. Greenland is home to one of the world's most remarkable ruby deposits, the Arpelutok mine in southwest Greenland. The rubies there were formed nearly 3 billion years ago, making them amongst the most ancient gemstones on Earth. The mine opened only in about 2017, and for several years it produced ethically sourced rubies and pink sapphires, gems which are then sent to Bangkok and to Thailand for cutting and sorting, before then being sold to international buyers. But in 2023, the company behind the operation, Greenland Ruby AS, filed for bankruptcy, with debts of approximately $73 million. The mine closed, and for a significant inventory of Greenlandic gems were left stranded in commercial facilities across Southeast Asia. Now Greenland's government has decided to repatriate those rubies and to keep their location undisclosed. Now this move takes on additional context when you think about how Greenland is currently dealing with the assertions from the American government and from President Donald Trump about taking over Greenland and liberating their own natural resources. It doesn't surprise me they're trying to keep their most beautiful secrets far hidden from those grubby little hands. Let's go to two significant stories from Alaska. First of all, a near miss, but thankfully with a happy ending. For decades, there's been a network of 9 seismic monitoring stations in the Aleutian Islands that has fed real-time data to NOAA's National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer. Last year, NOAA cancelled its contract with the University of Alaska Fairbanks that funded those same stations, a contract which was worth approximately $300,000 annually. The risk of this funding cut was pretty obvious. No tsunami warnings. But this week, a new agreement was confirmed, restoring funding through a different NOAA program, and the stations are going to be remaining online. $300,000 to protect millions of people. Frankly, it is a bizarre piece of this bizarre timeline that we're living in that this was ever considered a possibility. Second, this week in Alaska, the state's governor is seeking major tax breaks to attract investment in a proposed $46 billion LNG gas line, which is potentially going to be one of the largest infrastructure projects in North American history. Proponents of this gas line say that it's an economic necessity. Alaska's heavily dependent on oil revenues, and as we've all learned in the last few weeks, oil is not exactly reliable these days, and production has sharply declined in Alaska. Critics of this gas line argue that opening new Arctic territory up to drilling is frankly incompatible with climate commitments and necessities to, keep us all from dying. And it's just classic poor timing that this announcement has been made in the same week when Arctic sea ice ties its all-time ever winter. Let's end this week's broadcast with we'll move away from ice. We'll move away from geopolitical data. Let's just get to the heart of the Arctic. On Saturday evening, the small Norwegian town of Kautokeino, deep in the heart of Sápmi, the traditional homeland of the Sami people, the 36th annual Sámi Grand Prix was held. It's not a racing event. It's Sápmi's biggest musical event. The competition has 2 categories. The first is song, contemporary music performed in the Sami languages, and the second is the yoik. The yoik is one of the oldest surviving musical traditions on Earth. It is the traditional vocal form of the Sami people, usually performed without any instrumental accompaniment, just using their incredible voices to be many instruments all in one. It's special and beautiful. You can yoik a person, or a place, or an animal when you're doing it in that moment. And to do that is to conjure that person, that place, that animal in sound in that moment in time and space. It's a form of music that has survived centuries of suppression from Norwegian, Swedish, Finnish, and Russian governments. And yet despite these efforts, the yoik has survived. It is still here. This year, Ante Niilas Bongo won the yoik category with his piece, I'm going to pronounce this incorrectly, I'm going to say Nassa Aldut, I'm very sorry, winning by a single point in one of the closest competitions in recent memory. And the song category was won by the artist Eleanor with Dudusi. and I'll try to play some clips for you now.
Na lo 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 la lo lo la lo 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 la lo lo la lo 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 la lo lo la lo 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 la lo lo. Mun pisani puella skisko sledge. Ringein moido skolon.
Congratulations to this year's winners. Anyone who's not heard a yoik performed live, I really encourage you to seek one out. I promise you, you will not forget it. This has been the Arctic Brief for March. This is a new format, as I said at the beginning, that I'm trying out on the channel. Typically, I create these deep dive essays and I supplement that with these kind of shorts. But I mean, I'm trying to work with YouTube here. Shorts die after 2 days, and I just don't think it's any good for anyone. You know, it's not good for me trying to build this channel. It's not good for you. If you don't see it within 2 days, you'll probably never ever see these stories that I put out. So this is my way of creating a new vessel for these smaller stories, which probably don't need an entire half-an-hour style deep dive, but I think they deserve a bit of attention. Please let me know if you've enjoyed the video. If there's any feedback you want to give me, absolutely, I'm open to any and all feedback. If you come across a cool story which you think I should cover, whether in a short video, whether in a big deep dive, do let me know. Please let me know. YouTube things, of course, if you've enjoyed and you want to keep hearing more about Arctic news, culture, science, and all the great things and bad things coming out of the Arctic, do subscribe to the channel and I will measure to keep you updated as often as possible. Yeah, like and subscribe and comment. I don't know, comment on it's a new shirt. Do you like my new shirt? I do aim to be making these, hopefully, I'd say every 2 weeks. We'll see how it goes. So until then, stay safe, stay warm. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.